In this video, I will quickly show the various things that can be configured in the editor and in the engine. So all configuration is done from the editor menu. There are two separate things. One are project settings, one are editor settings. Editor settings affect everything and every project, though they are only user specific, they are not checked in. Project settings affect only the current project. Most of that data is actually checked in, so it will affect all users. Under the editor settings, we find preferences for all kinds of things. They are per application, per project, per scene. Nothing really fancy here. Then we have a shortcut editor where you can rebind every action that you like. And we have an editor plugin dialog. You usually don't need to use this at all. All editor plugins that are available are automatically loaded. They basically extend the editor with custom functionality. So for instance, the physics plugin adds functionality for all of the physics asset types like collision meshes and so on. The particle plugin adds all of the particle editor functionality, etc. And it's rare that you actually want to get rid of one of these, because if you don't need it, just don't use it. On the project settings side, there it's way more interesting. So one of the very first things you would set up after creating a new project are data directories. Data directories are simply folders where you have stored your assets. And there are two folders that you can't get rid of. One is the project folder itself, and one is the base folder where you have all of the really basic data like shaders and so on that the engine always needs. Everything else is up for configuration. So here we have added two additional folders where we have shared content. This makes it easy to put content into a folder and then use it across multiple projects. Simply click the Add button here, select a folder, and then press OK, reopen the project because it needs to repopulate the asset browser and so on, and that's it. Another basic configuration are the engine plugins. So by default, the engine will already automatically load all of the dependencies that the editor plugins have. So for example, the plugins up here are all, they only run in an editor setting. They are usually not used during actual runtime. So in an exported game, you wouldn't use everything that's called ezEngine plugin XYZ. Whereas these are all plugins that actually can run in a regular engine setting, and they add the actual functionality. So the fmod plugin adds the sound stuff, particle and physics plugins add that functionality and so on. Active means that it's actually loaded at the moment, and the checkbox means whether you want it to be loaded. If it's active without a checkbox, that means that some other plugin has a dependency on it and therefore it was dragged in. And it's again rare that you want to change this. However, if you write your own custom plugin to extend the engine with custom components, like for example we have done with the sample game plugin, then you need to go in here and check that so that the engine will actually load that plugin, and then all of the types and the functionality is available. Next up is the input configuration, where you can actually set up which keys trigger which action. I have another video about all of the input stuff, so I won't explain this again. Then tags are a feature that can be used to give objects various types of tags. So we have two standard tags, the auto call mesh and the cast shadow tag. So for instance, the cast shadow tag is literally used to specify whether an object casts shadows. You can use custom tags and add them to objects to, for example, say, this is an AI object, this is an important item or something like that. And then in game code query, give me all items that are tagged as important item in a 5-meter radius. Yeah. The window configuration is used for setting up something like the resolution, the window mode, and on which monitor to launch a window. So this is mostly used, for example, for the play the game mode, to specify the size and resolution of this window here, or the same thing if you actually run the player application. Of course, when you have a more complicated game, then you may want to configure that yourself in runtime code and have the user be able to select that. But for starters, it's very convenient to be able to configure some of that. There are two separate configurations. One is the project default, which is actually checked in and shared with all users. The other is a user-specific override, which you can enable to say, for example, I want to always launch it on a separate monitor than what the default is. For some projects, the clip mouse cursor and the show mouse cursor are actually quite nice to have, because in an RTS you may want to show the default system mouse cursor, in a shooter you don't. In one game you want to clip the mouse cursor to the window, and another you don't. Finally, plugins can create their own entries for project settings. So for example, the Fmod plugin adds functionality to configure the speaker mode, etc. And the physics plugin adds settings for the collision layers.